but it's the overarching theme. Let's start Genesis chapter 37, verse 1. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. A little bit of background. Remember, Abraham had the blessing from God, and God said, I'm going to bless all nations through you, and I'm going to give you all this land that you can see. Your descendants will possess it. Abraham said, I don't have any kids. God said, no problem. Here's a child between you and your wife. You're 100, she's 90, but I'm going to give you a child through your marriage. And it was amazing. And he had Isaac. And then Isaac, he had Jacob and his twin brother Esau, but God said, no, it's all going through Jacob. That's where it's going to go through. And the promise of God blessing all nations and giving them the land is coming through Jacob. This is really important because the way that God blesses all nations is through Jesus Christ. And so really what we're following is the family tree of Jesus Christ, who was born 1,500, 2,000 years later than this story. This is the family tree of the Savior of the world. That's how God blesses all nations, through this one family. That's the primary way, anyway. So it's important when verse 1 says Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings. He's living in the promised land. This is the land that is promised to him and his descendants. Jacob is the first, he's the first one in this family line to have a lot of kids. Both Abraham and Isaac had their sons late in life, and their sons were few in number. But that is not what happened with Jacob, right? Jacob's got 12 sons at this point. 12. Now we're starting to talk about like a lot of family. Right now we can start to see part of the promise play out. So that's what's happening. And when it says these are the generations of Jacob, this is the story of his family. This is how it plays out. Halfway through verse 2, Joseph, being 17 years old, remember he's the 11th son. He's the son of Rachel, who was Jacob's favorite wife. That was a messy, remember that? That was a messy situation. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. Remember? When Jacob went to marry his wife Rachel, he served Laban for 7 years. It's like, all right, give me my woman. I've served for her. I've earned her. And on their wedding night, crafty Laban switches Rachel with her sister Leah. Jacob doesn't realize it, wakes up in the morning, he's like, what has happened? You're not the one that I love. You're not the one I wanted to marry. And Laban's like, yeah, I forgot to tell you that in our customs, we don't let the younger daughter marry before the older daughter, so you get her first. And Jacob was livid, remember? And he served Laban for another 7 years. Well, he gets Rachel right after he gets Leah, but Rachel's the one that he loves. And then they have that whole battle, like Leah's having kids. She's like 4 kids, and Rachel's got none. So Rachel gives her servant to Jacob and says, hey, marry her also. I'll get kids through her. And Leah's like, well, if she's doing that, I'm doing that. And here's the servants, Bilhah and Zilpah. Those are the servants. Remember? Joseph was a boy with them. He was playing with them, living with them, serving alongside them. He was growing up with these young men. But he brought a bad report of them to their father. Verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. This is so much favoritism. We don't know if, right now it seems like Joseph's kind of a whiner, right? Y'all got that sibling that's just kind of like a punk, and you're like, dude, you need my sister, my youngest sister. She's my height. Many of you have met her. She was here for VBS. When she was in college, she got cocky. And my other sister and I we just couldn't put up with it. So I'll never forget we're at Grandma Bieseker's house, and Rachel's just running her mouth. Kind of like Joseph probably would have. And I looked at Sarah and I said, Sarah, we cannot stand for this. She's like, I agree, but what are we going to do? Dad will kill you if you touch a girl, so you can't do that. And she's bigger than me. What are we going to do? I said, let's put her on her head. Like, that'll humble her, and it won't hurt her. So we literally picked up Rachel. She's like almost 6 foot. She's playing college basketball at the time, right? She's not, this isn't an easy task. We picked her up and held her by her ankles and tapped her head on the ground a few times. Gently. It didn't hurt her, but man, her pride. Sometimes little siblings need that. They need reminded that they're not in charge. Right? Rachel needs, Joseph needs reminded. He comes and tattles on his brothers. Dad's like, it's okay. I love you more than anybody else. Here's a coat of many colors. It's expensive, a valuable coat. It's a flashy coat. It really puts on display how much Dad loves him more than anybody else. The family dynamics in these patriarchal families are horrible. Parents, don't do this, right? Right? Gideon and I were talking this week. We're like, this is not a parenting. This is not a how to be a good parent. He's like, you're right. This is how to be the worst parent in the world. Like, this is just bad parenting. He made him a robe of many colors. Verse 4. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Our first fill in the blank here. And Nathan, I was going to try and control it from up here, but I can't. So if you can help me out here. Our first fill in the blank is God is bigger than our comfort. Joseph's living a life of luxury. He's living a life of comfort. He's got the nicest clothes. He's got the favor of Dad. Anything he wants, he gets. He is the golden son. He's the golden child. Even though he's the second youngest. Beloved ones, just like in America, how sometimes we pursue comfort. Comfort's shallow. Comfort comes and goes. It's not the ultimate end. Why? Because God is bigger than our comfort. God has more for you than your pleasure. He has more for you in life than your happiness. God is so much bigger than our comfort. We idolize it. Joseph was used to it, but God is bigger than it. And loved ones, we have to get our eyes off of our comfortable surroundings because if it comes crashing down, our whole lives, everything about us comes crashing down with it. We have to get our eyes off of the comfort. Comfort's not bad. It's not bad. It's good to enjoy things from the Lord. But it can never be bigger in our eyes than God is. God is bigger than our comfort. And God shows this here in the story. God instigates, God is working in the midst of Joseph's comfort. Look what God does. Now Joseph had a dream. This is a dream from the Lord. The Lord gives Joseph a dream. How do you know it's a dream from the Lord? Because in a couple chapters, the dream comes true. That's how we know it's from the Lord. Now, Joseph had a dream. See, God's bigger than Joseph's comfort. He's like, hey, I'm gonna do something different. Joseph has a dream. And when he told his brothers, they hated him even more. Verse 6, he said to them, hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Right? When you gather grain, you're hitting it with the scythe, and then you pick up the long pieces and you bind them together so that then you can pick them up and carry them to the barn later, right? That's just how they do it. Similar to how we bale hay now, right? We pick it up and we wrap it up and we carry it, and it's heavy and fun sometimes. It's similar to that. But what did his sheaf do? See, sheaves are laying down. That's what they do. You cut them, you wrap them, they might lay. His stood up, and theirs did too. But theirs all bowed down to his. I'll tell you what, if there is a reason to bonk a sibling on the head with the ground, like this is it. Like they should have picked him up and just pounded him for this. But their father, and we're going to see this in spades come out at the end of the story in like 10 weeks. We're going to see this, but their father he's a barrier of protection among the brothers. There's certain things that they refuse to do to one another. They refuse to cause harm because of their father's presence. I think that's why they didn't just beat the pulp out of him here. His brother said to him, verse 8, "Are you indeed to reign over us, or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Verse 9, then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream." Oh, this guy, just like, what in the world, right? "Behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." Loved ones, God is bigger than Joseph's comfort. God's goal for Joseph is not that Joseph will be comfortable. That's not the goal. God keeps giving this boy dreams that are really offensive to his brothers. Partly because God's goal is not Joseph's comfort. God has a much bigger goal in mind. Verse 10, but when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come and bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. We see that kind of a posture sometimes in Scripture, right? Mary pondered these things in her heart. We just reflected on back at Christmas. Joseph is still Jacob's favorite son. He's like, look, you can't be thinking that Mom and I, now at this point Rachel's already dead. So I don't know if he's referring to Leah or Bilhah or Zilpah. I don't know who he's referring to here, but it's like you can't think that your familial authority figures are actually going to bow down to you. Like he doesn't say anything about the brothers. The rebuke is not the brothers, it's Mom and I. But Jacob, in his favoritism, leaves the rebuke at that. Do you see what's stirring up in the brothers here? Do you see how much they hate their brother Joseph? I mean, they hate him. And the hate is just growing and growing. And it's turning into jealousy. The hate is on the path to maturity. We'll keep following. Let's keep following the thread of hate. But let's continue in the story. Verse 12. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. Can you pull up that first map? I don't know if is it the next thing, Nathan? Or what is it? Show us the first map. So here's where they're living. They're living down here around Hebron. And if you remember, this is the Dead Sea. That's the Sea of Galilee, right? So when we think of Israel, we kind of think of in between those two massive landmarks. There's the Mediterranean Sea over there. So they're down here in southern Israel. That's where they're living near Hebron. But they take the flocks up to Shechem. Why would they go that far? Well, because that's where the water's at. That's where this is probably the dry season. And they just have to take the flocks wherever they can find grass and wherever they can find water for them. So this is normal for them to take the flocks other places than where they live. And so they take them up to Shechem. And Jacob wants to know how things are going. It's, I don't know, maybe a 2-day journey from there, maybe 3. And so Jacob wants to know. And remember, Jacob, God changed his name to Israel. So sometimes in the text it'll say Jacob, sometimes it'll say Israel. Same guy. Verse 13, and Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock? As Shechem come, I will send you to them." And he, that's Joseph, said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now and see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word. Tell on your brothers if you have to." This doesn't help their relationship with the brothers, does it? So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came up to Shechem. Verse 15, and a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." And the man said, "They have gone away, for I have heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. So he goes from Hebron to Shechem. He's wandering around in the fields up here. Meets some guy that's like, "This looks weird. What are you doing?" Just, like when somebody's just wandering around your neighborhood, you just know that they don't belong there. It's obvious that he doesn't belong in these fields. He's just looking for something. So he's like, "All right, I'll go up to Dothan and see if they're up there." So he goes. Verse 18. They saw him from afar. Why did they see him? How did they know it was him? How would they know? Somebody help me out. Yeah, what? Coat? His coat. His dad gave him this beautiful, expensive coat. And man, they could see him. What do you think their feelings towards him were like? Oh, this is good. Here comes Joseph in his beautiful coat. He's coming. He's probably bringing good word from dad. He's probably just checking. He probably just wants to go and tell dad how awesome we are. Not at all. They hate him. Their jealousy is burning inside of them, and they see him from a long way off. You say, Andrew, how do you know? Well, let's just see how they act. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired to make him a nice meal. Is that what it says? What's it say? Somebody tell me. What's the text say? They conspired to what? To kill him. This is the maturity of hatred. Loved ones, this is where hatred leads. Hatred, when it's mature, turns into murder. Dad is not there to protect Joseph. They see an opportunity. We are 4 days away from dad. We might be able to get away with this. So they're conspiring. They're conspiring to kill them. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come, now let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. I'm in verse 20. Into one of the pits, right? They had pits out there, water cisterns where they could collect water and stuff, and the pits were dry at this time. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. Verse 21. But when Reuben, that's the oldest, heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let's not take his life. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he, this is Reuben thinking now, that he might come and rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. Reuben's plan is, he's like, look, let's not just slow down. We don't want to murder the kid. Let's just put him in a pit. We'll just do that. But Reuben's plan is a little bit devious towards his brothers. He's like, I'm going to rescue him, and I'm going to take him back to dad, and we're probably all going to get in big trouble for this. But I'm going to save him. And I'm going to save dad's favorite child, which sometimes makes me better in his eyes, right? Let's look at this next slide. God blank in our blank. You ready? God works in our downfalls. God works in our downfalls. Have you ever been living life and everything's going well and everything's comfortable, and then all of a sudden it's almost like people are conspiring against you, or, man, the universe is just out to get me? You ever feel that way? Everything's against me. Beloved ones, I would argue, and I think this text shows us that even as the world is crashing down around us, God is active. God is not surprised by Joseph's downfall here. He's not surprised at all. In fact, God is actively working in it to work out his plans. The brothers cannot stop God's plan. They can't. They don't realize that they're instruments of God's plan, but they can't stop it. So here we see God working in this downfall. The first way he does it is Reuben speaks up to save his life. Joseph should be dead by this point. The brothers hate him, but Reuben steps in. Verse 23, so when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Verse 25, then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah, loved ones, this is God intervening again. This is God working in Joseph's downfall. And I would argue that he works in our downfalls as well. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother to conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up, lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Do you see what's happening here? Do you see what's happening? The Ishmaelites, the Midianites, what are these different people, the same people? I think they're the same people. The Ishmaelites settled over near Midian. It's not unthinkable to think, how do I say it? The most natural reading of this text, most conservative scholars would agree that these are the same group of traders, right? It's kind of like saying, I'm a Hershey, that's my family name, but I'm also a Hoosier, right? And speaking of Hoosiers, holy cow, that's enough. Man, right? But I'm a Hershey and a Hoosier. These are Ishmaelites and they're Midianites. They're both. They drew Joseph up, lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Loved ones, Joseph has fallen from grace. He has no protection from his dad. He has no comforts. His beautiful coat is now gone and torn and covered in blood. Have you ever thought about what it was like for Joseph while he was in that pit? Have you ever thought about that? Something about the pit made it so he couldn't escape. He's 17 years old. He's able-bodied. He just made that trip, that multiple-day trip, by himself, and his dad didn't think anything of it. He didn't have a bodyguard with him. He was the favorite son. He didn't have servants with him. He was able-bodied, but something about that pit, the way it was built, the way it was designed, something about it, he could not get out. Like straight walls, right? He couldn't make it. Have you ever felt like your circumstances were like a pit? Have you ever felt like you were stuck somewhere and you just couldn't get out? You just feel yourself being lowered down, further and further into a situation, and it just feels like you're helpless. Loved ones, there's such good news. There's such good news. Our final fill in the blank. It's such good news. God's plan is still accomplished when we're helpless. If you're in that pit, whatever put you in that pit, whatever that pit means in your life, when you're there and you feel totally helpless, like everything's out of your control. I mean, Joseph, he could have said whatever he wanted at home and his dad would have done it. Like he had just about anything. But now, all of that is gone. He's completely helpless. And he's facing death. Whenever we feel helpless, loved ones, it is so important for us to remember that God's plan is still accomplished. Whenever people at work malign us and lie about us and smear our name, and now all of a sudden we can't work in that industry anymore, God's plan is still being accomplished. Whenever we make massive mistakes and our whole worlds fall apart because of something that we have done, loved ones, God's plan is still being accomplished. It doesn't matter how helpless we feel. It doesn't change the fact that God is still at work and God is unable to be stopped. God will work in your life even whenever you feel most helpless. It's a really bad feeling to be there in the pit, isn't it? I don't know what your pit is. I can think of the different pits that I've been in life. I have a really cool story that I really want to share, but I didn't ask permission, so I'm not going to share it. It's not about me. It's about God stepping in to somebody's life in a really dramatic and awful way. And my friend's words were, that was the pit. I saw no way out. I saw only death. There was nothing that could save me. my friend said that as my friend looked back on this in retrospect, he sees that wasn't a pit. That was God's salvation. That was God saving his life. That was God changing the trajectory of his life in such a good way, in such a kind way. But loved ones, in the moment, the pit feels so helpless and empty. You're not alone in the pit. You're not alone. And the best news, not only are you not alone, but God's plan is still accomplished even when we're helpless. God is so good. Let's look and see what happens in the story. They drew Joseph up, lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. How bad is it? How bad of a position are you in whenever you're excited to become a slave? That's low, isn't it? Like Joseph is at such a low point that salvation is in the form of slavery. He's not dying. His brothers aren't killing him. They're not leaving him to starve and die of thirst in this pit that he can't get out of. This is great news. He's being sold into slavery. It changes our perspective sometimes. Whenever comfort is our God, we never think the God working by putting us in slavery is a good thing. We never think of that. I'm not advocating slavery. I'm advocating sometimes God's salvation comes in really painful situations. And God's kindness is exhibited in really painful situations that are hard to see. It's hard to see the goodness of God in this, but God is still good and he's still working. So these Midianites, these Ishmaelites took Joseph to Egypt. Verse 29, when Reuben returned to the pit, he saw that Joseph was not in the pit. He tore his clothes and returned to his brother and said, tearing the clothes, that's a mourning thing. That's an act of mourning. We might just yell or something, but back then they were expressive. And he just rips his clothes and he's really grieving over this. Verse 30, and he returned to his brothers and said, the boy is gone, and where shall I go? Then they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, this we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not. And he identified it and said, it is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him, and Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. They just let their dad assume the worst. That was their only plan at this point. Look at the hole that they are digging themselves. Verse 34, then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, no, I shall go down to Sheol, or I shall go down to the grave to my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. God's plan is still accomplished when we are helpless. The last verse, meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. God's working. Joseph's still alive. He's now in Egypt. He made it there safely. Now he's a slave in the house of Potiphar. Loved ones, I don't know what pit you've been in recently. I don't know what pit you're in now. I don't know what pit is coming in your life. But I do know that we all face pits. We all face moments and times of helplessness. Can we look at the other thing that this text brings out, besides the fact that God is working behind the scenes, besides the fact that God works in spite of the awful things that happen to us and around us and because of us? sometimes our pit is our own sin. We see such a good example of what happens when sin goes unchecked in our lives. The brothers are an amazing picture of this. I'm not saying that Joseph was an easy brother to live with. I think he was kind of like Rachel when she was in college. I think he needed bumped on the head. I think he needed straightened out. I think his brother should have taken him out back and whooped him a few times. Like, he needed sorted out. But the brothers are still responsible for their response to him. And the brothers, they let their hatred grow. Loved ones, do you ever let sin grow in your life? Hatred grows and grows throughout this whole chapter. The points that we almost had were the growth of hatred, the maturity of hatred, and the disappointment of hatred. That was almost the structure. But isn't that what sin does? As it goes, if we don't confess it, if we're not dealing with it, if we're not trusting the Lord to forgive it and cleanse us, we hold on to our sin, and our sin, we lie to ourselves. We say, oh, it's just a secret sin. Nobody will know. It's okay. I can keep it. And then we let it grow a little bit. And something happens and it grows a little more. But it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's just, and then it starts to get bigger and uglier. And before we know it, sin is mature in our lives. And for the brothers, that meant, let's murder him. That's where the sin of hatred leads. Loved ones, I don't know what you're struggling with sin-wise, but I want to encourage you. I want to implore of you. If you're struggling with sin, don't let it grow. Don't let it grow. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Because it'll only lead to death and destruction in your own life. Here's what I want you to pay attention to. And you can go read the rest of Genesis if you want this week. That's not a bad thing to do. I always want to encourage people to be in the Bible. But something we're going to see is that the regret and the guilt that the brothers carry with them for the rest of their lives because of this specific sin of selling Joseph into slavery. That regret, that guilt plagues them the rest of their lives. It chases them. They cannot get away from it. Loved ones, sin never delivers what it promises. It always leads to disappointment and heartache and death in our lives. I don't know why that had to be in the sermon, but I felt like it had to be in the sermon. Is that fair? All right. Deal with your sin. Confess it to somebody if you need to. Trust God even in your pits. When you're in the pit, trust that God is with you. He cares about you, and loved ones, he is working. Even if we can't see it, we know that he's working. Our God is a strong God, and he's got a plan. And his plan involves love, right? He loves you very, very much. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you